2.
With Alex Laurenzi.
Oh, yeah.
Let's do it. Sorry.
So, recently we saw Alexander Laurenzi at Chelsea Table and Stage
Yes.
do his New York debut
his
of
first time in New York.
his Water Lilies Suite. If you want to talk a little bit about the suite.
So we were talking about my college times a little bit, and part of my college experience was applying to different grants and fellowships and getting funding to do certain creative projects during the summers in between school. In 2018, I did kind of like a history project where I went to Copenhagen, Amsterdam, and Paris and studied the history of jazz in each of those cities, which was basically an excuse to experience the cities as a musician myself. And I interviewed different musicians of different generations to get a sense of the impact of certain expats like Dexter Gordon or Ben Webster, Tootie Heath, like people that lived abroad for a long time, and understand how they function in those scenes. And when I was in Paris, I was at a museum with my friend, and kind of in tandem with all the jazz history stuff I was doing, I was also a big fan of Debussy's music and then Claude Monet's art. And we happen to have a few paintings of Monet's in the Princeton Art Museum, which is just a classic Princeton problem, I guess. So I would sometimes, if I had a free moment, go to the museum just to look at the Monet paintings. And I wrote the best grade I ever got in Princeton was a paper I wrote on Monet.
Wow.
On one of the paintings. It was like an art history piece, and I was like, I'm not an artist like that, and I never thought of myself as an art historian, but it was oh, okay, maybe I'm pretty good at that.
Love that.
So I was always interested in studying his stuff more, and I always kind of did it as a side hobby. And I'm in the museum, in the Musée de l'Orangerie, with one of my best friends from college, Harry, and we're leaving this museum which has 8 of his famous Water Lilies paintings. And Harry very casually is like, wouldn't it be cool to get Princeton money to come back and spend more time in the museum? And I was like, that's an idea. And that was basically the seed for this idea of the Water Lilies Suite. So I came back the following summer, spent 2.5 weeks going to the museum every day, studying the paintings, and I ended up writing a suite, a jazz small group suite, based on with a song that was corresponding to each of the 8 paintings. Ended up being a 60 to 80 minute suite, depending on how long the band improvised for. But it was basically an 8-part, completely original suite. And the process was just taking these large scale paintings. They're 40 feet long.
Holy moly.
So these huge paintings,
So
and just trying to figure out why are people so drawn to these paintings? Why am I so drawn to these paintings? I'm not a huge abstract art guy, I didn't think. But they were so calming, so serene, but they were, even though on a large scale they might have been serene, there was a lot of activity at the surface. And so it's he's painting, something that looks like a water lily, but if you look at it, it's just ferocious strokes that are weird color combinations intersecting with each other, and it just all worked, And so I ended up basically translating the form of each painting into some sort of musical form. And so for me, some of the paintings read more like a narrative story that has a beginning, a middle, and the end. Maybe you start at the left edge of the painting and you kind of go left to right. And so there's a kind of temporal element to how you view the painting, right? You are following the painting as it goes left, right. But then some of the paintings, maybe it's just one mood. It was okay, this is basically just green. And there's some variation, but you're overwhelmed by a green mood. And so some of the paintings were more what I call mood pieces that are meditations on one thing. And how that connects back to a jazz concept, I think, is some of the modal kind of vamp heavy music of the 60s and whatnot. And then for the more kind of narrative storytelling of reading something in a time element, then that's kind of different forms with different sections that lead from one to the next, so it's less of a cyclical thing. Maybe it's more of a through composed kind of multi-section thing. But every painting had a different way of being read. Some paintings I read it as middle to edges, some edges to middle, there's one that's right to left, so it really just depends on what the activity of the painting was. But there's it was like a study in form, expression of what's happening.
Yeah.
Because everything was complex at the surface,
Yeah.
but then on the large scale, it's like everything's just like serene and beautiful. And so it's like, how do you have all of these things happening at the same time?
Yeah.
That was kind of the challenge, I think.
So that's why I'm so excited about this one. That's why I was like, ha 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 ha, I have so many questions. I'm curious, I guess maybe we could start, you kind of talked about how like Monet as inspiration is sort of the basis of this. Do you want to talk more about the inspiration part of it as it applies to writing it?
Yeah, I mean, just the scope of the paintings, like, they're these huge paintings, right? And it's like, how do you, like, he created something that was just so overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so right off the bat, even if it's like a simple painting, or it seems like a simple painting, like, you're just overwhelmed right away. Just the first moment of contact is like an event.
Yeah.
And, the universal reach of it, I thought was really interesting. Like, people travel from all over the world to go to this one museum, which is a tiny little museum in a garden along the Seine. It's like, it's unbelievable. And, I think, like, musically, I'm not trying to be the most, like, popular, modern composer, but it's like, it matters to me that something like this, on Monet's terms, has an effect on so many types of people.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just for artists.
Yeah.
It's like for everyone. And it's part of why it's for everyone is because, like, the substance of the painting is a serene, it's like a landscape setting that they can imagine experiencing.
Yeah.
We've all seen, well, unless you, like, live in a city and have never been out of the city, like, if you've been a little bit in the country, everyone's seen a gorgeous, fields with mountains behind it, or gorgeous bodies of water. Like, we've all experienced moments in nature that are just, like, breathtaking.
Yeah.
So the inspiration was easy because it's like, this is just so cool. Yeah. And it's, something that I studied as I was, like, falling more in love. For me, Debussy is very influential, but it's also because it's connected to Strayhorn and Ellington. And then that leads to Mingus, and that leads to everyone since. But Debussy's a good entrance point for a jazz person who wants to get more into modern classical music, or European classical music. And so I studied a lot of Debussy stuff with the Monet stuff, and what I ended up learning is, like, they're actually doing the opposite thing. Debussy, as a symbolist, is taking an object or a thing and creating abstraction from it. Whereas Monet is taking some super abstract thing and making you identify something that could be real in it. Right? So it's like the water lilies are not this literal thing on the painting, on the canvas. It's just strokes. It's just like brushed strokes at a certain angle, and then you look from it at a distance, and your mind creates this image of the water lily. So, musically, what I'm doing is probably more like Debussy. It's probably taking this painting and then making something abstract out of it.
Yeah.
Because when I'm playing, it's not like you're thinking, oh, that looks like, X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
But because I've been able to give some context to, like, why the music sounds the way it does, there's a relationship between, like, the symbol or the this is about some trees, At the end of the day, like, what is it about?
Yeah.
And so I think it's, okay, I'm taking this body of work and trying to help people imagine beyond stuff that's normal. So, like, I'm not necessarily trying to... This is a jazz suite. It exists in a jazz context. I don't want people to leave the show just thinking that they just went to another jazz show.
Totally.
So it's like, how am I pulling from different influences that are... Some of them are, like, more like folk influences of growing up listening to Joni Mitchell and Cat Stevens in my house, and, some of these other, like, pop influences. But then, obviously, the classical pull of, like, a Debussy, Stravinsky, and then everything for me comes back to Ellington. If you're an American composer, you have to be fluent in Ellington's music to even exist. So Ellington like combines all these things. There's all Mingus is a big influence for me. Coltrane, like Ambrose Akinmusire, like the way he works with different sections and develops ideas, and so all these things are at play. But the goal is, like, how do I get people that are not necessarily jazz fans, but they are friends of mine who want to experience the music? What's the takeaway for them? How do they leave feeling as engaged as a museum goer would go,
Yeah.
who might not know anything about Monet, but knows that these paintings are incredible and famous.
And that's the cool intersection to
Yeah.
me, the art and the music. 'Cause I think it makes it palatable for people who might be more uncomfortable understanding
Right.
the music, or the other way around. Like, it just
'Cause
gives a more
it's
immersive.
It's an abstract
situation.
expression.
Yeah.
Like, whatever we're playing does not have the most literal meaning, you know?
Yeah.
But that's the point. It's like we want people to feel empowered to, you know, run with it in their own way.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to leave the show feeling a different way based on what they bring to it and what they expect of it.
Yeah.
And so they're going to leave with different things. But that to me is like the point of great art. You're not. I don't want 50 people leaving with the same conclusion.
Yeah.
You know, and the hope is that if we play the suite another time for the same person, that they leave with a different
Oh.
thing than the first
Gotta
time.
hear it again.
Because then like that's otherwise you're just like that's the purpose of pop music. I want to go and I want to hear the song exactly this way and blah blah blah
Yeah.
blah blah. What we do is supposed to be more spontaneous. Having a little bit more of a concept with like what the music is, honestly allows for the band to play it with a different kind of edge. It'd be one thing to just like write these tunes and say, all right guys, play it. I think they'd sound great, you know. But there's a whole different level of tenacity that, and I've noticed this playing it a few times, like the band just, they take it beyond what I expect it to be, which is the point. The point is like, we're not supposed to have a lid on what it can be.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'd rather go see, you know, Taylor. I'd rather, you know, because we know what we're getting with that,
Yeah.
you know, but we're supposed to push people beyond what they are expecting or what they can imagine.
Yeah.
And as artists, then it pushes us to, you know, as improvisers, to push beyond what we know. It's something Branford said, I think, is Branford Marsalis says, it's already not popular music, so just attack it, just do it. And, like, don't worry about what people think of it as much. And for him, it works out that because he's really good, and he makes really intentional choices, and he has a great band that's been working together for a long time, it always sounds great.
Yeah.
You know, but there's a little bit of a nonchalance there, like a little bit, of this kind of like, why do I care? Like, you know, whatever you think of me won't really stop me from doing the thing and seeking that gear, or seeking that truth.
We have one more question for Alexander today. Alex Laurenzi, we're so happy he could join us.
Yes.
This last question.
Thank you again for having me.
Of course. All right, this question is a doozy. How do you envision the future of music, and what role do you see yourself playing in it?
Yeah, it's a big one. I recently was invited to a concert at Lincoln Center, but I think Wayton's incredible, and I think it's good as a jazz musician in New York to like go see the orchestra play or go see Wynton and be reminded of his greatness. And like, I think a lot of us have careers because of what he's been able to do, and so that's an example of somebody who it's not just about creating his own career, but like literally creating or keeping a subset of the industry alive, with like this kind of return to more acoustic jazz and like really like centering swing again in the sound of the music. He's not the only person that's done that, but he's definitely the most public and the most influential, I guess, in that sense, in his reach. And so I think it's good for everyone to like be reminded of that, because I think sometimes people get a little grumpy. But I was at a show, and he said something at the end of this concert. He said it so casually, as he tends to say a lot of deep things. He said, "We're all here just trying to reconnect things for people." And I was like, "Whoa!" And like, you know, my phone's off, but I like immediately take it out and like write it in my notes, like, because it really hit me. It's like that is kind of what we're trying to do, and whether it's reconnecting or connecting new things for the first time, I think if we can think in that mindset more, it's gonna be better for everyone. So as far as the future of music and all that, I think if we can think of how we're connecting with people, with each other, both as like, you know, collaborators and musicians, but how are we connecting with audiences? What kind of audiences are we connecting with? You know, I used to play with somebody quite frequently where I kind of like asked in a not targeted way, but in a kind of like I was asking aloud, like when was the last time you played for an audience that had at least 5 black people in it? And like her face got like white, like she was like, like, because I don't think we think about that kind of thing. I think we're just thinking about, I'm just trying to like make money playing, or I'm just trying to gig. It's like, well, what kind of gigs are you playing, and who are they for?
Yeah.
Who is it serving? You know, even if you have like a gig that has like a low key, like a restaurant gig or something.
Who's there?
Who's there? What is it? Yeah,
Yeah.
like how is that actually building your career, and like how are you engaging with people? And it's hard out here, so I'm not like judging
Yeah.
based on who people play for and whatever, but it's just like, are you thinking about that? And for me, I'm more interested in playing for curated spaces, playing for people that maybe have not had access to the music before, but in general, just playing for people that need the emotional healing or the wellness of being part of a performance experience. And I think if we do a little extra work to think more about what we're actually creating and like what we're emitting from an energy standpoint, and think less about like how much money we're making on the gig or something, like then the finances will all work out. You know, because people want to be seen, people want to be connected, even introverts. You know, people want to be comfortable around each other, and that's not really in the like. We don't talk about that often. We generally talk about a lot of other stuff. But as far as the future of music, if we don't figure that out soon, I don't know what we're doing. You know, I don't know what we're doing. So it has to be. I kind of come back to this idea of like it's social music, and that's the cultural backbone of it. And if you're not engaging it in that way, it's just you're doing something else.
Yeah.
And I don't know how great that thing can be if you're not able to share it with people. And like part of the American project of like all of us living this like in this multicultural society is like jazz is a great and improvised music and creative music is a great front line for this project, this experiment. And if you're not playing for diverse audiences, like we're supposed to be the hip ones, the progressive ones. So if we're not thinking progressively, what's the point? It has to be about each other and reconnecting or connecting things, because that's historically what it's been. And if we get stuck in this like Instagram silo thing, we're screwed. So, yeah. Reconnect.
Thank you for joining us, Alex.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Yay! We love Alex Laurenzi.